Hello and welcome to the IIS Alumni Voices, a podcast series where we reconnect with graduates of the Institute of Ismaili Studies who have achieved excellence and made a significant impact in their personal and professional fields. On today's episode, it's my pleasure to welcome the recipient of the inaugural IIS Alumni Recognition Award, Professor Karim H. Professor Karim is the Chancellor's Professor at the School of Communication and Journalism at Carleton University. It's the highest honor given by the university for scholarship of outstanding merit. He has an extensive record of over 35 years of service to academic, community, public, and civil society institutions. His scholarly work has received international recognition and has been translated into multiple languages. Professor Karim is also the first IIS alumnus to have led the institute in a directorial capacity. It's an honor to have you with us, Professor Karim. Congratulations on receiving the Alumni Recognition Award.
Thank you, Imran. I'm very pleased, extremely pleased to be here.
It's my pleasure. So let's journey back to 1985 when you graduated from the IIS. It was almost 4 decades ago, and it would be right to say that you have been on a journey of excellence over the last 4 decades. Can you tell us what motivated you to join the IIS as a student back then?
Thanks, Imran. Well, you call it a journey of excellence, but of course, in a person's life, there's ups and downs. It's been an interesting 4 decades. I will start before what happened before I came to study at the IIS. In fact, before the IIS was even established, because there was something that was very much part of my life as I was preparing for my university education. I'd made up my mind to pursue Islamic studies in the 1970s as a young person in high school. And it was a lonely path because most people were going into sciences or business or other careers which were seen as much more solid. So I just kept things to myself and applied to American universities for admission to study Islamic studies. And I was fortunate enough to get admitted to Columbia University's undergraduate program in Islamic studies. And it so happened that the week after I received admission, the chairman of the Ismaili Association, which is the precursor of ITREB, gave a lecture in Jamaat Khana. He had just attended the landmark Paris conference in 1975, where the concept of the Institute of Ismaili Studies was discussed, and the decision was made that this would soon be established. So I was thinking, I've plunged into this career, into this field of study, but I've never thought about, employment, and hopefully, there's some opportunity here for employment or doing some work in connection with the Institute of Ismaili Studies, IIS. So going down the line, I went to study at New York in Columbia University, and it was in December 1977 during Saligra, a talika was read out that the institute was established, which was another bit of good news for me, that things were happening. And so during the next summer in 78, I went and visited the IIS. It was at Russell Square, which is one stop on the Piccadilly line from King's Cross. Basically, there was no one there. It was just 2 offices. I peeked through the letterbox and didn't see anything. There was no one home. But eventually, in later visits, I was able to get to know people there as the institute grew. And then I myself became a student after finishing my undergraduate degree, a master's student at the IIS, which was a great honor. What I have found is that the institute provides a first-class education. That a lot of care is taken about the quality of courses, the materials that are prepared for teaching, but also in terms of the overall trajectory that the student will have. And of course, the program I was in has evolved. It is now GPISH. When I was in the program, which was 40 years ago, we spent 1 year in London at the IIS, and the second year at McGill University. It was a joint program. And so we all basically went through this. It was rigorous, it was good, it was a high quality program, as it continues to be. And then I went on to other studies, I guess, which we will talk about later in terms of slightly changing my trajectory.
So you were among some of the earliest IIS cohorts. That's great to hear. You briefly touched upon the IIS McGill master's degree that was offered. Obviously, the institute has evolved a lot and a lot of things have changed over time. What other programs were offered at the IIS in those days?
There were two programs at the IIS at that time. There was the YSEN track, which had started 2 years before my arrival in the IIS in 1982. And then there was the academic track. The YSEN track was very diverse. It had students from different parts of Ismaili settlement, Syria, Iran, India, Pakistan, East Africa, North America, Europe, and beyond. It was a very exciting group. And so by the time my group arrived, we were 7 of us, less diverse. People from Britain, myself from Canada, there were several people from India, and one person from Sudan. But it was nevertheless a good, solid program. It was interesting because there were professors whom I'd wanted to study with, both in my undergraduate and graduate programs. And the institute basically, when I came here, I found that they were already here. That they were going to be teaching courses. People like Professor Madlung, Wilfred Madlung, was a great authority in Ismaili studies. Professor Abbas Hamdani, a great scholar of Fatimid history and thought, etc. And so we were very excited to be here, to get to know people, the diversity of the Ismaili world, so to speak, through both these programs.
And what was the student life like? Did you have a nice accommodation? I've heard this quite often, that we have been really lucky to have stayed in Victoria Halls.
No, accommodation was basically left to the students themselves. Yeah, you're rather fortunate.
I would say so.
Yes. So, it was a bit of a struggle. There was very little, there were no cards to identify us as students. I was the informal student leader for our group and would go and negotiate with the executive director at that time, Shams Velani, for various concessions for the students. Yes, it takes me back a long time thinking about those things, but it was fine. Life revolved around the IIS, and it was on Great Russell Street or Road, I forget now. That's where the location was when I was studying here. I saw that students, especially from developing countries, were extremely enthusiastic. they wouldn't miss a single guest lecture. Sometimes when I was exhausted and wasn't able to attend a guest lecture, they would ask me, "What are you going to miss a lot?" So I guess I was spoiled, having already taken a degree in Islamic studies, and having had so many resources, available to me. And this was very exciting. The enthusiasm, the thirst for learning that I saw in my fellow students, the camaraderie, the community of students, that was very exciting. And of course, London itself is a very interesting city. It's a major global metropolis. It's a long history. And the location of the IIS in London, of course, offers many, many advantages. There's the British Library. There are so many museums. It's a very rich cultural life. And so all of these things made up for a very good experience.
Exactly. It's a privilege to have access to all these resources that you mentioned. So moving forward in time a bit, you are also the first IIS alumnus to have a directorial position at the Institute. What was the significance of that role? How did it feel to be on the other side of the table, if you will?
Yes. So it was a great honor to be asked by His Highness the Aga Khan, Hazir Imam, to take on this position as co-director with Dr. Farhad Daftari. And it was a significant task because the institute is it's a very unusual institution. It provides graduate learning, and of course, has to provide all the facilities, the library, and other things for graduate learning. It is also a research center, a major research center in Ismaili studies, and has people, some of whom who are just research associates or now associate professors or assistant professors doing research and publishing, as well as the IIS interacts with the community. Community relations, and there's a separate body of research as well that is done just on the community, which is not published. And so it has multiple functions. And to understand that initially, to be able to manage the personnel, the work of the IIS in these multiple areas, was challenging. And of course, working with the Board of Governors, who were very much involved, would have more meetings than a regular institution would. And so this took some time getting used to. I had taken a 2-year sabbatical from my university where I was director for the School of Journalism and Communication. And basically, threw myself into this work because it was work for the Imam, work for the community, and it was intense. It was thrilling, very fruitful. There were many, many challenges, but I think overall it was extremely educational for me. So the education never stopped. It didn't stop. At being a student, you're constantly learning. And so being surrounded by other scholars, students, the larger community, it was a moment, it was 2 years that were intense, which were extremely productive, and really have shaped my life after I left in the institute, the work that I'm doing currently, which is largely to do with topics on Ismailis, contemporary Ismailis, and institutions. And so this was the turning point for me. Even though I had a lot of experience in academia, being a professor of communication studies and being a leader in that area. Coming back to the IIS was something that, as I said, very educational. It was inspiring, and it made me think about certain things that I'd not thought about before. And so I continued to address them after I left the IIS as co-director.
Yes, you are absolutely right in pointing out that IIS has very diverse and broad engagements. And it makes sense that you must have gained excellent experience in your role as a result. I was going through the scope of work you have done, and I see that you have contributed to academia, you have worked with AKDN, and even government and public policy institutions. So how do you navigate and balance between such diverse fields?
You know, I'm thankful for the opportunities that I've had in my career. One finds that when you try and do your best, that there'll be many long periods during which your work will not be recognized. You have to continue, working in the background. But as long as you you maintain that the work that you do is of good quality, that it is the best that you can produce, you don't cut any corners, that you maintain ethics, high ethics in the integrity of the work that you do, ultimately people will see it. And you will be asked to participate in various circles, in various committees, various boards. People will trust you with leadership positions. My position at Carleton School of Journalism and Communication was actually an elected position. And I was very honored that the faculty in my school trusted me with this position. And so the work that one does for those many years on one's own or with others and ensures that it is done to the best of one's ability in an ethical manner, in a manner that ensures high quality, that will basically, in the word that basically gets around, when you publish, when you present papers at conferences or give keynote lectures, etc., people who attend, if they like what you have to say, or even if they don't and they find your work at least intriguing and controversial, they may invite you to certain areas, certain venues where you are able to debate with people of differing ideas, and things move on. And so, having also an inclination to give of oneself to civil society, for voluntary work, and so on, when you make people aware that you are interested in doing that sort of thing, people do approach you, and if they have confidence in your work, they will ask you to basically participate in some important work. And I've been very fortunate that in Canada, as well as in the United States, I've been asked by government bodies to provide advice, to participate in consulting groups, and even meet in small groups with ministers, and be able to share my ideas, my thoughts, and to have them challenged. And so one has to be open to these kinds of engagements. One has to put oneself out there. It requires courage because you're engaging with and debating people who may be much smarter than you and much more knowledgeable. But as long as you have done your work, you're confident about the area in which you work, and you feel that you rightly have something to contribute, I think that's where you feel confident enough to participate. But sometimes, even though you may have a lot of knowledge, I found that some very smart people hold themselves back. So it's been my good fortune that people have given me these opportunities, and I have taken them, and they have proved to be very, very fruitful for me in terms of the constant learning that I've been able to do.
Thank you for sharing that, Professor Karim. It's truly inspiring. Moving on to your research and scholarship, you are currently a professor in media and communications. So at what point you decided to switch your career from Islamic studies to media and communications, and what was the motivation behind it?
So let's go back to my student days, where I made the decision to move from Islamic studies to the study of communication. As I was finishing, it was at the time that I returned to Canada to study at McGill as part of the joint IIS McGill program, that it happened to be Silver Jubilee. And the Imam, as part of his farman, his guidance to the Jamaat, a major theme of his concerns was the misrepresentation of Muslims in the media. Remember that this is about 4 years after the Iranian Revolution. There were a number of, for the lack of a better term, terrorist activities taking place, supposedly in the name of Islam, people claiming to be acting in the name of Islam, and people who didn't know much about Muslims, or some people who had never even heard of them. The only occasion on which they would hear about Muslims is during these violent incidents. And that's what the impression they had about this group of people. And I was quite moved by the Imam's concerns at that time. It was something that I had already been thinking about. I had been reading the literature on this, the emerging literature. And I took some time thinking about how I could contribute in this area about which the Imam was so concerned. I asked the Institute of Islamic Studies at McGill, where I was located at that point, if I could do my PhD in that area, but they were not too keen about that. So I looked elsewhere at McGill University and other universities, and I was admitted to McGill's program in communication studies. It was a very small program and with a small faculty, and I was admitted, but it was quite challenging in terms of the orientation at that time of communication studies, which was seen as a social science, and Islamic studies being largely in the humanities. The questions which were being asked, the scholarly questions, the methodologies, the underlying philosophical paradigms were very different from what I had experienced before and I was aware of previously. So it was a tough period, but ultimately I survived, and so when I completed my dissertation, I published it, and I was surprised at how eager people were to read my book, which was called Islamic Peril, Media and Global Violence. It is still being read. There's a system in Canada which tells you which books, how many times your particular publications, your books are being taken out of libraries. And surprisingly, people are still reading my book. It was published in the year, initially, the first edition in the year 2000, and then again 2003 after 9/11. And it still seems to be of interest to people because I think that the way in which I've tried to balance the understanding of how journalists report, there's certain thinking about a conspiracy, that journalists have a conspiracy against Muslims. This may be true among certain people, but that's not how media would survive in a conspiratorial manner. And that's the kind of balance I brought, because there are much more profound, much deeper issues which produce certain kinds of thinking and perception and reporting of Muslims or any other people. In the case of Muslims, we know that there have been confrontations between Muslims and Europeans for many centuries. We also know that there have been long periods of harmony, for example, in Andalusia in Spain, as well as research and my own travels have shown in the Balkans, where the Ottomans were engaging with Christian Europeans on that side of the continent. That hardly gets reported. People do not know about that on a day-to-day level of existence, the kind of arrangements, the kind of harmony that existed between Muslims, Christians, Jews, and people of other faiths allowed for very productive societies and exchange of ideas, exchange of thought, even exchange of certain religious concepts and practices on which there has been very little research done. So we have to address the media portrayals of Muslims from that kind of a perspective of how this is not necessarily deliberate, but sometimes a case of ignorance, a case of centuries of stereotyping, and how these misconceptions are layered in literature, like when we see the kind of portrayal of, for example, Othello, who is called a black Moor. So he's African, he is Muslim, and even though there are certain sympathetic aspects to him, ultimately he falls prey to his own rage and commits murder. I mean, he kills his own wife, who happens to be a European. And there are many elements to this in terms of the stereotyping, the kinds of images that are produced through this kind of very seminal literature by Shakespeare and others, which are then repeated in classic paintings of the Romantic era. You see the kind of violence that is depicted by painters, by famous artists. And then when you have the contemporary media emerged in the early 20th century, in film, one of the earliest famous series, The Sheik, mispronounced of course, in which an Arab kidnaps a European woman, a theme that you will see continually portrayed right to our present time. Kidnapping, hijacking, etc. And of course, these things happen, but the way they are portrayed in Muslim contexts, in the way that Muslims are are doing these sort of things when it actually happens that a lot of other people are doing similar crimes as well. But the way that the Muslims will be stereotyped has a long history, and it is layered, and it triggers certain acceptances of an endemic violence among Muslims. So, for example, to give you a very contemporary example, the horrible October 7th attack by Hamas and others on Israeli villages, settlements, produced certain kinds of violence. But there were claims made by certain very unscrupulous Israeli reporters and so-called witnesses, which, for example, claimed systematic rape and so on, which have turned out to be completely untrue. Now, why does this happen that the media around the world immediately pick up that story and report it around the world as if it is true, it is completely factual, without checking into the sources, looking into evidence and so on? The evidence is just not there. People have looked for the evidence. It just is not there. Yet, prime ministers, presidents, ministers, various media have reported this ad nauseum. It happens because the stereotype already exists. There's a very low threshold for that the stereotype produces for untrue stories like these to be taken as truth. And this is how the media work. This is how storytelling works. This is how information spreads, even, of course, now on the social media. And so we need to understand what are the dynamics of communication flows and believability. What are the things that you will find believable, and what are the things that you will say, okay, I'm going to put this on hold and look for more evidence and then see whether this is correct or not. And so when Muslims are portrayed in certain reports, very flimsy kind of reporting, portrayed as doing bad things, there are a lot of people who will believe it immediately because that's the stereotype, the dominant stereotype that exists. So my work is basically try to show how these sort of things happen.
Yeah, you rightly mentioned that media has a huge influence in shaping identities and perceptions, certainly more so in today's digital age than ever. You have also done quite a lot of work on Ismaili media. I personally benefited a lot from your research and publications while I was working on my JPish thesis on digital religion. And that brings me to one of your most recent publications, which is on the dynamics of media production within Canadian Ismailis. Can you tell us about what it aims to explore and what are some of the key findings?
Yes, this publication that you referred to is part of an anthology in which there are several chapters on Canadian media produced by minorities. And my chapter looks at 50 years of publication by Ismailis in Canada. And so 50 years is a long time. This takes us back to the 1970s when a substantial growth took place in the community. And official media, mostly print media, began to emerge, produced by various community organizations. These included not only the council organizations, but also student-based organizations. What I found in the student organizations' publications was a certain level of freedom and critique to express ideas. And even among the the council publications, as well as the Ismaili Association, the precursor of ISRA, you would have the freedom to say certain things, and first of all, the existence of several publications in different locations across Canada, in various provinces, which doesn't exist now. What has happened is an increased centralization across Ismaili communities around the world in publications and generally structurally, organizationally, etc. Critique is important, and of course, the IIS also in its graduate programs talks about critical thinking. And sometimes we may draw a line in terms of what kind of critical thinking, what kind of critique is possible, is appropriate, is it constructive, is it destructive, what are the motivations? So what I'd like to do is to step back and address the core values of Ismailis, of the faith. Many of you will be aware that the original name of the community, of the faith, 1,000 years ago, even before the Fatimid period, was Dawat al-Haq, the invitation to truth, or the summons to truth, or the mission of truth. Truth is a very important value for the community. Even when the mission spread to India, the term that was used by the peers preaching there was Satpanth, the path of truth. And there are many expressions with respect to truth, haq, ahli haq, and ra'i haq, and so on, which are used by Ismaili philosophers to express their core values, their core concepts, their core ideas and motivations. It's something I think has been blurred a little bit, for the lack of a better term, in terms of the way that the faith is positioned today. And so this is relevant when we talk about contemporary issues. So coming back to community media, if we're going to talk about critical thinking and critique and various forms of expression, if one is a podcaster or someone who writes a blog, etc., what he or she needs to ask themselves is, how am I embodying the ethics of truth? Because, of course, Ismailis don't have a monopoly on this concept. But, as I said, our original name is Dawat al-Haq, invitation to truth. And it is a crucial value. And if you listen carefully to the tasbihs in Jamaat Khana, the word Haq appears several times. It appears in the dua as well. And almost goes unnoticed. But it is a very, very important value. And it is a guide for us ethically and in terms of how we present ourselves, what we do in media or elsewhere, to follow this particular path. And of course, even the word Sirat al-Mustaqim assumes truth, that this straight path is one of truth. And so this whole explosion of media, of the diversity of media, the content that is being produced by people around the world, and including Ismailis and of course other Muslims and so on, if it is not grounded in truth, then there's problems. Of course, we know there are huge problems with disinformation, misinformation, etc. And one of the papers that I wrote a couple of years ago in a journal called Media Theory, which is actually an example of the interdisciplinarity that I deal with in my work, is to look at the story in the Quran and the New Testament about Maryam, Mary, and how God breathed the truth into her ear, leading to the birth of Jesus. Now, it's a very complex concept, which I explained in that paper, but I relate it to media theory, to contemporary media, and the kind of importance of adhering to the truth and its value, and how even Quranic and biblical stories hold true in contemporary times when we are racked with disinformation and misinformation, and we don't know what is real and what is not. And so if there is a reorientation by human beings towards factual reporting, true reporting, reporting with integrity and with ethics, the standard or the touchstone of truth becomes very, very important. And for us, for over 1,000 years, this has been a crucial value. And so what is Ismaili thought going to say about these issues? Especially when now, that there's a lot of concern, rightly or wrongly, about AI, artificial intelligence, and what that can produce, and the kinds of misuses of AI. Again, the value of truth becomes a standard by which things can be structured by organizations at the national and international level. So this is something that you can basically start off thinking about at the community level, but which has so many repercussions and is grounded in bigger subjects that apply worldwide in terms of how we operate today.
You highlight a critical aspect regarding the emergence and progression of digital media within the Ismaili community, and its importance, the importance of its alignment with the core values of faith and truth. Given that many of our graduates often work within Jamaati organizations, they play an important role in shaping communications within the broader Ismaili community as well. So how does one ensure that media initiatives by these organizations, whether it's ITRAB, AKDN, or the IIS, effectively serve the diverse needs of the global Ismaili community?
Yes, this is a very pertinent question in the world that is emerging now. And as you said, it's potentially many of these jobs are the jobs that IIS alumni may have. So we are in a world where, on the one hand, the technologies are enabling free expression or close to free expression. On the other hand, government regulators and civil society and others are urging for caution. Government regulatory bodies are basically instituting regulations that limit what one can say. And of course, there are good reasons in some cases against, for example, regulations against hate propaganda. And so where does one draw the line? It's a very complex situation. And before one jumps into this area, one has to basically think very carefully about what I said earlier with respect to the ethics of media, the values of media. What kind of values? What kind of values do you want to engage in a media organization? And there'll be pressure depending on the organization for which you work, whether it's a community organization or it's a commercial organization or even a government organization. There will be pressure on you as a media producer or even a speech writer. You may be writing a speech for a high official, a minister, or even a president or a prime minister or whoever. And that person may want you to put down certain things which may or may not be true. And it puts us in very, very difficult situations. And it's, speaking from my own experience, one has to basically carry out a dialogue with one's supervisors as to what is appropriate and what is not. It's not always easy. Things sometimes have to be done in a rush. But if on an ongoing basis, one makes it clear what one's values are, you may be moved to another position, which perhaps where you can do things that work for you, or you may want to leave the position. I know it's not always easy to do that, but these are things that I'm putting forward with respect to how the real world operates. And I will admit to you that one of the things that hasn't come up in my career is that when I was working on my PhD, my scholarship had run out. I was raising 2 kids with my wife, and took on a government job, and basically was, among other things, writing articles, speeches, letters to the editor for the government minister in the ministry that I was working in. It was not always a comfortable position. I had to sometimes, dare I say, twist the truth, or at least make the untruth seem palatable. And ultimately I left the job. And it's not always easy when there are not many jobs out there, when a job is well-paying and your family depends on it and so on. But these are issues that face all human beings of conscience, whether it's in the job market or elsewhere. And we have to decide for ourselves what our values are. Do we take ethics seriously? And what are the hard decisions? What are, first of all, the hard questions we have to ask, not only of others, but ourselves? And the hard decisions that we have to make throughout life.
Speaking of making hard decisions and upholding values of faith, as you previously talked about, ups and downs everyone has to face in life. From your experience, what sources of inspiration have guided you throughout your career, and how can IIS graduates apply those similar principles in their own lives?
Many Ismailis have, from their childhood, have a sense of mission. We want to serve the Imam, we want to serve the community. That's how many of us are raised. And I dare say many students at the IIS think in that way. Without going into too much detail, I still remember I was about maybe 11 years old, and attending a religious class in the evening, and was told by the teacher that people outside the community sometimes have a very bad impression of who we are. They call us names like assassins and so on. But, and this is back in the 1960s, late 60s. But, he said, Hazar Imam has these manuscripts, and he is just hoping that certain Ismaili, young Ismaili people will choose their careers to engage in Islamic studies, to study Arabic, because many of these manuscripts are in Arabic or Persian. And basically, these manuscripts will show the world what the reality was, what the truth was. And this really excited me. And so I chose Islamic studies for that reason, because I wanted to contribute to that effort. It was a very idealistic approach, of course, for a young person. And it was, of course, it didn't turn out to be exactly, that. But I did end up working, looking at media representations. I think increasingly for me, ethics has become extremely important, the topic of ethics. And it is not an easy subject. We are constantly tempted to do something else that is, may not be so ethical, to take the easy way out, to cut corners, as I've said before, to be, to basically make things. Sometimes you have to get things done by a deadline, and it may not be the kind of product that would basically have been done with proper adherence to values and ethics. But you want to get the job done because there are many people waiting for it to be completed in a deadline. So these cause a lot of soul searching. But it's important that we have these conversations with ourselves, that we are engaging with the world, with our careers, with our families and the world, the community, from a basis of strong values and ethics. Ultimately, you will be recognized for that. Just as your good work, the good quality of your work will be recognized, the upstanding nature of your character will be recognized. And the kind of responsibilities that people will consider for you will account for your values and your ethical work. It is not easy. It is, dare I say, a lifetime of trouble, because you will constantly butt heads with people who will disagree with you, who just want to get the job done. And that's what the world is often about. So this is something, and it's a roller coaster. It's not always easy. And I do not claim to have had a pure life. There's constant ups and downs. But as long as one is aware of what the true path is, and one tries to keep coming back to it, I think that's what's important.
Let's talk about career trajectories. The IIS has a multidisciplinary approach when it comes to studies, and our graduates work in various fields, ranging from education, finance, and law to technology and healthcare. From your perspective, Professor Karim, how can IIS graduates leverage their training at the IIS to succeed in diverse career paths beyond academia?
It is really part of the thinking process as students are doing their courses as to how the studies that they are doing will enable them to do what they want to do, the kind of careers that they want to work in. And so obviously the choices of the courses you take after finishing, so it's still 2 years at IIS and then at a university?
Yeah.
Okay, so the choice of university, the kind of program, will of course depend on one's interests, one's passions, and ultimately, one has to see how what one learns at university will prepare one for the career of choice. Now, at my university, it used to be primarily academic, but increasingly we offer courses, practical courses. Students are expected to take at least one practical course, and in fact, they're very appreciative of that because it gives them skills which are practical skills, hard skills, which are appreciated in the workplace. So it's really a combination of one's interests, what one has taken as a student in GPH and beyond in the university degree, as well as other courses, short courses, online courses, life experiences, internships, etc., that one may experience. There's no easy answer to this, but coming back to what I said earlier, it really is the quality of your work. There are no small jobs. One of the things that I did while I was working on my PhD, looking at the portrayals of Muslims in the media, was to basically help out at a news agency. And this was in Montreal, where McGill University is based. It was, to call it menial pay would be incorrect because it was, I think, let's say, at that time in the 1970s, even then, it was $5 a day. But I was doing it for the experience. It taught me a lot about how this was a job that involved doing some research, making phone calls, doing interviews, and so on, and then writing articles, feature articles, and so on about. It was an agency that dealt with development issues. So I would deal with issues of indigenous people, but minorities in Canada settling into Canada, what kind of problems they were having integrating into society and so on. So since I was concerned in my dissertation about the portrayal of Muslims by journalists, this job helped me understand the work of journalists. And it was very crucial for my dissertation. And it was something that I could understand firsthand and not blame journalists unreasonably for falling down on their job. So it's things like that. One has to basically look for opportunities where one does get practical experience working in different kinds of settings. Sometimes these settings will not lead to the kind of career you want to, but it allows you, it gives you different skills, engaging with people, engaging with problems, doing problem solving, etc. And as I said, there are no small jobs. However small or menial it may seem, and I put this in quotation marks, the quality of your work, your conscientiousness, your ethics will show you to be the person that you are. And people who are looking to hire, who are looking to recommend, are watching people who do work in different jobs. And so one may experience, getting some help, either as through recommendations or through a job offer from places that one least expected. But this happens because you are doing a good job at whatever you're asked to do. That's the most important thing that we can do while we are put it this way, in the lower rungs of the career ladder.
Indeed, that's some excellent career advice. just to explore it a bit further, how important is networking to succeed in these careers, particularly for our fresh graduates who are about to start their professional careers or entering academia?
Yeah, I think it was an English poet who says, "No man is an island, and neither is any woman or any other person." And so we have to interact with people. We learn from people. We give to people, and so it's important. These days it's called networking. It's been called other things before, and we did it because basically we hear about opportunities, we share information, in various phases of life, you will need different kinds of help. Early in your career, in your mid-career, in your late career, you will be writing recommendations, references for people. You will be pointing out opportunities to people which suit them very particularly with their skills and knowledge base and so on. And this is something that one does, as a form of generosity, of kindness, but it is something that we benefit from as well. So if it becomes part of the norm, then everyone benefits and we are all participating in it. So yes, networking is very, very important within the IIS community, within the community as a whole, and within the larger world, because I have benefited, I know, from all these ways. And it's wonderful to see that now there is, for the last few weeks, I've been participating in the IIS WhatsApp group and constantly learning from my colleagues. So this is fantastic.
Yes, alumni WhatsApp groups are such a great way to network and stay updated. And I'm glad to know that you are a member of one of those groups. I have one final question for you, and it relates to the future. Obviously, the IIS and the Ismaili community have big expectations from our graduates, and rightly so, because they are trained to be the leaders, right? And they have great potential. So what roles do you envision IIS alumni playing in shaping the future, be it in academia, community service, or other professions? And also, what steps that they can take to fulfill their potential?
People who have received the very particular education that the IIS has to offer are quite unique. And obviously, this refers to all of the alumni, the 800 alumni of the IIS. But let me tell you something from my own experience. I attended a funeral 2 weeks ago of a person whom I'd met only once. And I'd met this person because he was a guest lecturer in one of my religious classes. And he had, to a young mind, certain ideas, when presented the right time, really spark your imagination. And he had talked about the concept of God, the absoluteness of God, which had really sparked my imagination. He himself was a mathematician. He actually was, at that time, I was just calculating how old he was, and he was just 20 years old. He was in the final years of his undergraduate degree. But he had quite an interesting mind, and he had shared those ideas with us. And that particular those concepts that he shared with us, for me, became the matrix of how I would approach Muslim philosophy and philosophy in a larger context when it came to God, creation, etc. So I attended his funeral. Unfortunately, I never met him again, but I attended his funeral more than 50 years later. And I have probably shared his ideas with my students and other people. And perhaps my students will carry on those ideas forward. What I'm saying is that everyone in the IIS alumni, and of course this doesn't only apply to IIS alumni, but this is to illustrate the longevity of teaching. If you spark the imagination of the people to whom you are talking, whether they are students or other people, it can have an influence that is decades long. And it carries something good, I hope, which will benefit so many people. It doesn't only have to be the concept of God, it could be other things. But the potential that you have as a well-educated person is just tremendous. It will outlive you, and it will move into the future generations. So this is something that I think every educated person should consider. Every educated person is a teacher, potentially. And it's something that I think we should think about as we talk to other people in a very humble manner. This is not anything to be arrogant about, but it is the power of ideas, the power of thought, and the power of communication, and the power of education.
Thank you, Professor Karim, for sharing your valuable insights with us today. I'm sure that our listeners have gained a great deal from your expertise. Thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
The views expressed in the podcast are solely of the speaker, based on their research, reflection, and experience. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions, beliefs, or policies of the Institute of Ismaili Studies.